Welcome to the Rex Andrews Show. Glad to have you with us. Welcome to the conversation. If you're a first-time listener, please don't forget to subscribe. And then also, we're not bashful to beg around here. In fact, I've got a collar on, so I will say that I'm a well-dressed beggar. Please give us the best rating you can. We love those 5 stars because it tells us you love the show and it helps us with placement in the app stores. And speaking of app stores, if you don't like the one you're listening on today, you can find this on 23 other ones. So we are distributed around the globe. And in fact, thanks to you, our listeners who return, we actually have listeners in 32 countries, over 6 continents. And if we could figure out a way to market to penguins and help them recharge their cell phones, we'd probably have them on all 7 continents. We have listeners in lots of fun places, and I like to do shout outs. And today, I will welcome to the program back our listeners in Cebu, Philippines. So welcome those folks in Cebu. All right, great guest today. Excited to have her on the show. But before we get to that, now we're distributed just about everywhere we can think of, social media and all of the podcast channels. But please stop by the show website. And the reason I ask you to do that is because we have profiles on every guest, including our guest here today. Now, when we have our conversation and interview and we spend some time together, we only get to scratch the surface often in their stories, who they are. So stop by the show website. You can get to know them a little bit more through their bio, but most importantly, links to their online assets so you can learn more about them. Okay, that's it for all of the housekeeping things. I'm excited to have her on the show today. I always love to say I've got too many interests for just one lifetime. But my biggest problem is I'm always finding a discovery around every corner. So we have a discovery here today. All right, so here we go. She is an author, okay, a spokesmodel, an entertainer, and founder of Michelle's Sanctuary. So excited to hear her story and the things she's working on today. I need to listen to this program and her conversation because she talks a lot about sleep, something I need. So welcome to the show, Michelle Hotaling, if I can say that right. I think I got that. How are you this morning, Michelle?
Yeah, Hotaling. It's okay. No one gets it right.
Hotaling. Yeah. I don't even use my last name because nobody can pronounce it. So I use my middle. So fantastic. Hotaling. Okay. So listen, we love to learn people's stories because success doesn't fall out of the sky. And so we'd like to have you take us back. Now, this is a long list of questions, okay? So don't worry, don't have to write them down. I'll fire them off to you. We like to know where you were born, okay? And then also where you were raised. Those can be completely different things, and those have influences on us. So I actually had a guest, Ellie Soja, who was on the show, and she moved 63 times before the age of 15.
Wow.
We'd like to learn more about what you did as a youth and a child, so interests that you had. So maybe it was dance, theater, computers, sports, etc. Heck, it could even be shoplifting. We had a guest who was a car thief by age 15. So anything that we want to learn about influences there. Want to know about if you have siblings, okay? And then if you do have siblings, did any of them survive your harassment? Talk about your parents. So what type of influence were your parents on you growing up? We tend to see 3 different types of influences, very, very supportive. So parents who are launching pads for people to move on, parents that were sort of indifferent, kids that kind of raise themselves. And then a horrible one is some trauma and those types of things where our guests were like, I don't want to be anything like that. Okay, so we want to learn that. A little bit about your education, and then just some hopscotches along the way, pivot points of where it got to you today. And I know you went through some interesting periods in your life after looking through your bio and inviting you on the show. And then you're doing some pretty fabulous things today. So if we could, Michelle, take us back to the beginning. Where were you born?
All right, let's go back to the early 80s. I was born in Albany, New York, and then I grew up in upstate New York in a town called Cooksaki, which is mispronounced as often as my last name. So I got that double curse. I actually grew up in a trailer park for the first 8 years of my life with my 2 siblings that are younger. And my parents, my dad was a blue collar worker at the time. My mom was a stay-at-home mom.
Okay.
Then we upgraded to a house, and I spent the next 10 years there dreaming of moving to New York City. And at 17, I finally made my way to the city where I've been pretty much ever since.
Since New York. Okay. Fantastic. What did you do as a youth? What were your interests? What did you do in your spare time?
I was kind of a weird child. I was definitely a dreamer who thought I was talking to bumblebees and immersed in nature and rescuing stray cats in the trailer park and putting them in a rabbit cage we had in the backyard. Um, I was always creative, and I was a Bette Midler diehard fan. And Bette Midler became this like surrogate grandmother to me when I was about 8, 9, and she became the impetus that launched me into wanting to be an entertainer and move to New York City and be an overachiever and do whatever I could to get out of that small town.
Okay. Wow. You're the first person I've ever known that has that much affinity for Bette Midler. So I'm sure she appreciates your fandom. So anyway.
I'm not really sure on that actually, but.
So your dad was a blue collar type worker. Was he do just kind of labor jobs, or what kind of work did your dad do? Was he really involved, or was he just trying to eke out a living?
When I was really small, he was trying to eke out a living. So he was a body mechanic, and then he started to develop allergies and issues working in that field, and he transitioned over and became an insurance adjuster and spent most of his days on the road. I will say it had a huge impact on me as a child, a sense of mortality, because as a kid in the 80s, he would come home, and back then he'd have Polaroids of people's cars and would show off blood on a steering wheel saying that guy didn't make it. So the kind of idea,
oh my goodness,
that something could happen, which is it's no accident I live in New York City and I'm never in a car. If ever in my daily life, I walk everywhere, take public transportation. But yeah, he was around, but kind of just the guy who showed up on the weekends and would put on a Michael Jackson album on the record player and dance with his kids. And
okay.
He became more of a permanent fixture in my life later on. It was actually my grandmother, his mother, who was my biggest influence those early years. She was diagnosed with cancer and knew she had a limited amount of time. So the first 8 years of my life, I was basically with her all the time.
Okay. Fantastic. Well, I can relate to the horrible pictures. My father was a highway patrolman. We had an entire we had an entire file cabinet in our basement full of accident pictures, and some of those were horrible, because when they do those accident pictures, they have to take pictures of everything, not just covered up, so
yeah,
it was crazy. So
it stays with you.
Yeah, I learned not to drink and drive, not to drink and drive at all, because we had just a library of those types of things. Okay, so you went on to high school. Did you go to high school there in the small town, or did you finish school there?
Yeah, I finished school a year early there.
Okay.
I actually had a plan to graduate at 14, 15, but the guidance counselor kept saying no, so I managed to get out at 16.
16.
And then I moved to New York to go to college, and
okay.
I managed to do my college studies in 2 years in a semester. So I was done with college by the time I was 19.
Fantastic. Okay. Where'd you go to school in New York?
Marymount, Manhattan.
Okay. Yeah. Fantastic. So what'd you do after college? Now, did you have some jobs along the way that you kind of spun into, or what did it look like after college was done?
It was a freelancer's adventure, which is pretty much what my life still is. While in college, I met someone who was a fellow Bette Midler fan, and we were Bette Midler groupies throughout college. So we wrote a memoir about basically stalking and trying to revive the career of Bette Midler in 99, 2000.
What are the odds of that? Two Bette Midler fans.
It was very serendipitous, especially like that age. Although I will say I went to a small liberal arts college that was primarily performers. About 8 to 10% of my graduating class were men, and most of them were gay and Bette Midler fans. So it was like this whole clique of us on the Upper East Side in this like wealthy neighborhood.
Oh my goodness.
Bette Midler fans. So we weren't that much of an anomaly.
This is going to be an clique. Yeah, sorry. This is going to be an episode to remember, and an entire clique of Bette Midler fans. Because I'll tell you this, she's an incredible performer, but I don't think I'd listen to more than 2 or 3 of her songs. So anyway, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've kind of lived this life of this freelancer. What types of things have you done?
So, I mean, at that time, after I wrote the book, I was 19. I moved to LA for a year, tried to get it made into a movie. I had some celebrities helping mentor me around the way, and it just wasn't working out. So I would help ghost write things for people at the time. And I was working as an actor because it was actually easier for me to get work. Surprisingly, everyone thinks that's the struggle. That's where I was getting more paid work. So I was doing TV pilots. It wasn't fulfilling for me at all because I came from this idea that I was going to be like Bette Midler. I was going to be a trailblazer singing. I wasn't going to be constantly cast as some pretty victim in Vermont who gets murdered, or it was always, I was either the victim or I was playing, honestly, a prostitute or some kind of like beautiful woman in a scene. It was unfulfilling, and I did not want LA to form me at that age. I knew at 19, 20, if I stay here, I'm not going to become the person I want to be. So I came back to New York, on my 21st birthday.
I have a friend who has a daughter who went to LA, to go do the chase actress career and stuff. Lots of opportunities like you did, just, little things here and there, all over the place, nothing is substance. And her brother would just say, actress equals waitress. And so if I always laugh about that. But no, you're probably the third person I've interviewed that took that journey. Okay. And everybody stepped away from it. So that's interesting. Get back to New York. Did you go back into the arts and entertainment, or what would you do?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, the reason I got involved in anything is like, I've always felt I'm an artist and a creative type. So I thought, how can I get my voice, my story, whether it was a book or I was a songwriter. So when I came back to New York, I focused on music and started working with producers and got a publishing deal, and I toured for a bit. My early 20s, the focus was mainly music, but I'd still get acting jobs. Commercials were my mainstay at that time too. So after MySpace and all of that went down, the money, everything changed. I always hit the wrong timing. I hit that moment where it went from these last huge record deals with like Nora Jones to, not making money, and then the labels trying to get money from everything else. So I started to get frustrated, and I started working in commercials because it was easy money and it was great. 1 day of work, a year's salary, done. And I was just really fortuitous that I fell into those things. And I wasn't happy. So I started volunteering all the time, and I volunteered with children's camps and senior citizens. Like I wanted a richer experience than I got in the entertainment industry. When I looked at someone like Bette Midler, I thought, wow, it's so great. That must be so fulfilling. And then I realized it wasn't. I was just reading someone else's lines. Today, I actually, every morning when it's nice, I go to Central Park and I journal, and I try and start with the things that I'm grateful for. And this morning I started journaling about how grateful I was that I could choose what I wore. Because I remember for years in my life, I couldn't even wear what I wanted. And like just the basic choice that I get to wear clothing that I am comfortable in and look like I want and sit in the park and journal it was the biggest journey for me after years of modeling and acting and all of that.
Wow. So I get the sense you're a person who has had a journey where you've been seeking depth. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. Everything has to have a meaning to me and has something else behind it. And there's a reason, and I'm being guided towards some mission in this life.
Okay. So what was your next hop? You came back to New York, you were still sort of doing this, probably maybe a gig economy before gigs were really a word.
Yeah, right? It was definitely less alluring back then. Now it's like a thing. Back then it was like we were just a bunch of vagabonds.
Yeah. I mean, I've done a lot of that in my career. I've been in tech, and I've done all kinds of different things. And people look at you like you're a wanderlust or a vagabond and stuff. And now, like you said, it is definitely, you were doing the gig economy before gig was cool, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I did everything from, I remember one time I was 23 or 24. I was the polygrip girl. Now, mind you, I have all my teeth, although they've had lots of work. But I had this like cigar box of polygrip, and Florence Henderson, from the Brady Bunch was the spokesperson, and I had to like parade around with her with this polygrip.
Oh my
And of
goodness.
course, received so many jokes at my expense of why I was a 20 something with a polygrip. And, people trying to investigate my mouth to see if I had dentures,
Oh my
which
goodness.
I don't, thankfully. So yeah, that was one of the gigs. I had so many. Someday I'll write a book about the insane gigs that I've had, because some of them are beyond belief.
Okay. So tell me a little bit more about when did you start Michelle's Sanctuary?
So I started that in 2015, and it came out of that lifestyle that I was living with commercials and having call times at 2 a.m. I became an insomniac, and I had
Uh-huh.
always been someone who was kind of restless. And I went to YouTube around 2013, 2014, and I discovered these meditations at the time. Some of them
Hmm.
from Jody Whiteley was someone I followed. They were low tech, they were, kind of messy, but they helped me sleep.
Yeah.
And for the first time in my life, and I was never like a big sleeping pill user, but one of my doctors, one of the actor doctors, gave me Ambien, before a shoot, because at 6 o'clock I would be told I had to be somewhere 3 a.m. the next day. And I'd had that struggle we all have, like, how am I going to get enough sleep? I need at least 7 hours. And it wasn't a good way to go about it. So I discovered these meditations, and all of a sudden, if I'd either have a hard time falling asleep or staying asleep. And all of a
Yeah.
sudden it was solved. 20 minutes listening to this, and I was out like a light. And not only that, I was using it to deal with any other things throughout the day. I noticed I didn't have anxiety on set anymore. I was more relaxed. But I noticed that people weren't doing what I wanted to see. They were focusing on hypnosis and meditation, which is it's limiting to some people.
Hmm.
A lot of people don't meditate because it's intimidating, and they think they can't sit still and just
Sure.
breathe. So I started creating sleep stories that were these immersive experiences, and I use hypnosis techniques and breathing techniques, but then I create this landscape, which is really cool. It's not like a movie. It's like being in a dream state where you can do anything. If you want to fly in the stars, if you want to go under the sea and sleep, with a mermaid, you can do whatever you want. Like, there's
Sure.
no limitation. So that's really what's fueled me, and it's grown immensely, even before the pandemic, but the pandemic kind of accelerated it because all these companies started popping up. So I have Michelle's Sanctuary on YouTube, which I release content every week. And then I work with all the big apps that are up and coming right now.
Fantastic. So what was the motivating? Was it just the restlessness? I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to get to the point, because normally what I always like to do is, like, people have that aha moment, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And I like to always get to that aha moment, because the one value out of my show, if nothing else, is it helps people see, oh, I could do that too. Or,
Yeah.
oh, I've had that feeling. And maybe they've just not acted upon it. So do you remember, looking back, was there just aha moment you said, you know what, I'm going to go do this?
Yeah. Actually, one of my close friends who is an actor, and he works in tech as well, he had developed this really successful YouTube channel. And
Hmm.
he saw that I was doing well financially and getting these jobs that actors wanted to get, and I was not fulfilled. And he said, you need to just figure out your own thing. He's like, YouTube's the place you can go. You can
Right.
create whatever you want, build an audience. And for the longest time, I didn't know what to do. And then when I was discovering these meditations, I was like, well, this is perfect. This is something
Yeah.
where I can get an audience to come back to the same video for
Yeah.
years. Like, this is timeless.
Yes.
And it will give me full creative control once I get that audience. I will be able to take them wherever I want, and they will trust that. And I think it was all of that. I've always been a writer. And so one of my mentors early on was Pat Conroy. He wrote The Prince of Tides, and he was just such a big influence on me. So when I sent him my album, my first and second album, when they were released, and he kind of just became this guide for me. And I remember telling him, I'd love to write novels, but I'm too impatient. I want that audience interaction immediately. And that's what I
Right.
love about this. You put it out there, it's there. It
Yeah.
doesn't take a year like an album. It doesn't take 5 years like a book. You
Right.
instantly connect.
Okay. Now, you've also written a book, right? You're an author?
Yeah. So my book was the Bette Midler memoir called Bet or Bust.
I'm almost sorry I asked now. Oh my goodness, that's hilarious.
Yeah, that's why I said it's questionable whether or not she appreciates my fandom. Yeah, I wrote that when I was 18.
Okay. Well, hats off to you. Writing a book is no small task, as you know. And that
Yeah.
is a very unique topic. So I guess that's probably a genre where you don't have a whole lot of competition, is there?
No. No,
Oh,
and it
that's
came
funny.
out just after the Almost Famous thing, which is like a totally different
Oh, that's
vibe of what a groupie is like. We were definitely a different, yeah, different experience altogether.
now your audience on YouTube is fairly large so far. I was looking at it before we came on, and you're just under 44,000 subscribers on YouTube. That's great. How did you get to that point?
I think it was consistency, and I started, the thing that actually moves me the most, I got an email today from somebody, is that therapists and drug rehabilitation centers and all of these other mental health spaces have been recommending patients, clients come and listen. So that's
Okay.
helped drive a lot of traffic. I've had a lot of success over the years of people solving their sleep issues and anxiety issues listening. So
Yeah.
word of mouth has been really key for me.
That's fantastic. I can relate. I've not built a content like you have for this issue, but I can completely relate about that restless feeling. I tend to be a person who is, if I see a problem, I want to go fix it. I've got 5 kids, and if there's something going on, I want to go help them fix it. And not every time can you be the fix it person. And so I just have a restless soul right now because I just see so many things that are going on in our country, so much division, so many things that don't make sense. There's just a loss of common sense and stuff, and I want to fix it. And I don't get political about it. Just like I don't really care what side anybody's on. It's just like, all right, common sense. I'm sorry. Can you tell me that math is really racist? I don't think so. So let's
Yeah.
let's fix that idea. Well, I can't all by myself. And so I have had sleep issues for about the last 5, 6 years because I'm just restless. I'm just restless. And so talking to you today is interesting. I'm definitely, I saw you have about almost 200 videos out there. I might be busy for a while at night listening to, because like you, I am a lot of nights because I don't want to have the illumination and have the light, that basically creates the dopamine and keeps you awake. So I
Yeah.
literally will put on earphones and go find something to fall asleep to, because if I don't, my mind sits there and just runs and runs and runs.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah, I put that in my meditations and sleep stories a lot, is that we all individually have to accept that time is just for restoration,
yeah,
and tell ourselves, and I put that in the scripts, but like to just remind yourself, all that stuff can wait. There
yeah,
is plenty of time for it, and
plenty
that
of
is
time.
not the time. That is the time for you to take the time you deserve to unwind and relax. And that's it. And do whatever you can to get to a state of relaxation. You earned it. You made it through the day. You did all that stuff in one day. You have 5 kids. You were busy. You have enough time to worry throughout the day, which we also probably shouldn't be worrying. But when it's time to sleep, it's time to sleep and relax. And
Yeah,
if that means, I tell my listeners, if that means pampering yourself with lavender oil and a bath, and I keep my bedroom pitch black. Like when
yeah,
it's bedtime, it is. I was traveling last week, and just like the light on an alarm was bright to me because I keep it as dark as possible.
sure.
Like your bedroom's your sanctuary,
Yeah,
and you deserve that time. Like that is your vacation. I also tell people too, think of it as a vacation. When you're going on vacation and you get to that beach or your destination, you're not going to sit there and try and solve all the world's problems. You're going to
no,
say, I'm in vacation mode. I'm
that's
done.
right.
And that's what
Yeah.
every night we need to do when we go to bed. It's vacation time.
Yeah, a lot of the experts that I've listened to or studied, they're saying a TV in your bedroom is about the worst thing you can have.
Oh, I thought about this with my ex all the time. It's not why we're not together, but I said no TV in the bedroom. Once I had a bedroom, I had a studio apartment in New York for so long. It was a luxury to be able
Yeah,
to just have that room for sleep.
or the sleep. Yeah, that's crazy. Because again, we don't think, because even if you're watching something, then your mind winds up against whatever you're watching. You know.
Oh yeah. And I'm someone who remembers my dreams big time my whole life. And so if I have something influencing me before sleep that is out of my control, whether it's a Facebook news feed or it's the news on TV or whatever it is, it's going to mess me up. So I just
Yeah.
shut that down. I don't even let it.
So using your techniques and the things that you've developed and figured out, how did that translate to an anxiety throughout the day? So obviously
Well,
you've tackled sleep, okay? So how about anxiety? Are you teaching like mindfulness? And because part of mindfulness is just in some sort of a little bit of meditation. How did you help? Because you say I didn't have
yeah.
anxiety. How do you help people with anxiety?
So I do have sleep meditation specifically for that because I think our subconscious works out so much when we get to sleep. It's a really good time to prime yourself for that. So
Mm-hmm.
I'll keep that involved, but every story I have, and it's interesting because when I started this, there was no differentiation. It was just sleep meditation. It could be a story, a visualization. They were all the same. Now
Right.
Calm and all these apps have like specified it. So people have certain expectations. My sleep stories have always had a flow to them. They're going to have a relaxation, a wind down time. And even though it's going to be an immersive experience, typically I tell it in second person. I'm going to put as many quotes, tidbits throughout that story that help with mindfulness
Okay.
so that it's just natural to have these thoughts. I mean, I did a sleep meditation recently called over the pandemic because a lot of people were struggling so much called You Are Loved. And I couldn't believe how many people hadn't even thought to themselves that they're loved at all by anyone or even themselves.
Sure.
That repetition, it's creating that with the plasticity of the neurons in our brain. I've been studying this a lot lately. It's creating those new connections. And if habitually for years you're used to anxiety, you're going to have a lot of work to do. And I think when we're sleeping, it's a really easy time for that work to be done. Our
Yeah.
dreams are working all that out.
Yeah. I have a daughter who she's in medical school, but she is one of the most creative persons I've ever met. And I have a family text and with the kids all in it, and my goodness, she spouts off just about every other day about some dream she's had, and I'm like,
Good for her.
I'm worn out, man. I don't even think I can remember a dream, but she'll come and some of them are just crazy. And then she talked about a day or two, maybe it was this morning, a dream inside of a dream. I'm like, well, how do you get that? So interesting. No, our
I can help you
minds.
with that. There's meditations for that if you haven't
Okay.
had that experience. But yeah, I get so much clarity. I also am really focusing now with my brand this idea of using imagination for the greater good. We have normalized imagination for worry. If you told me that you're worried, this country's going to war, we're running out of gas, all of these things that aren't actually happening. But if you escalated with worry, everyone would be like, it's a normal conversation.
Yeah.
If you use your imagination in a conversation at a dinner party to talk about all of these beautiful things that I try and incorporate, people would just be like, what's this weirdo? I remember one of the biggest arguments I would get into with my dad is he always said I was wearing rose tinted glasses. He's like, you're going to
Mm-hmm.
move to New York City, rose tinted glasses, you're going to get shot, like all of these horrible things, which are like legitimate fears for a dad, I guess, to have. But I was like, if I stay in that space, dad, that's going to happen to me. I
Right.
need to be in that space where I am visualizing connections and, all the things that I was able to make happen at 17, 18, 19 on my own in New York would have never happened if I took on that lens of worry. And so
Okay.
that throughout the entire span of my life where I've always landed on my feet and made these really miraculous things line up did not come from the imaginative worry. It came from the imaginative possibility. So I'm really trying to put that in my stories too, for people just to embrace that, especially now when it's easy to worry.
Yeah. So if you were to give me one phrase of your work, what would it be?
One phrase.
One phrase. I'm pinning you to the wall. One phrase.
Well, my catchphrase is "It's time to dream away," and kind of a
Okay.
pun on that, like dream away, fall asleep, and
Yeah.
have your dreams at night. But also dream away your life. Start enlivening the dreams you have in your waking life to make them happen.
Yeah. So what's next on the horizon for you?
Oh boy, self-care. This year, because of the nature of the pandemic, my other side career, which I passionately love, is I taught cheese classes um, at this lovely one of the oldest cheese shops in the city. It was a hobby. I was volunteering when I was an actor just because I needed something that had a fluidity, and I just loved the setup process, and I just wanted to hide in the back and eat cheese. Basically, you could volunteer for classes and then just eat and drink for free. And I'd go home with hundreds of dollars worth of cheese a month. So I was fine just hanging out in the back. And sure enough, after 3 years, they said, you have to teach. You have taken more classes than anyone in the entire company. You can't keep volunteering.
Mhm.
So I started teaching, and I started a burrata making program there. And it helped feed that extroverted side of me so that I could go home and work on my sanctuary stuff. So I'm hoping that returns. New York is opening up, but I'm not
Yes.
gonna, I think it might be a little while still.
Well, I have to ask because my smart aleck mind goes there. So while doing all these cheese classing and cheese, were you listening to Bette Midler music while you're doing your cheese?
No, I mean, it's not, sometimes it would come on or someone would put it on as a joke. I think my Bette Midler affinity kind of ended at a point.
Okay.
I mean, a lot of people have said don't meet your idols, and
Yeah.
I would say, except I met Stevie Nicks, who was charming. So she was another one of those singer-songwriters I looked up to. But no Bette Midler.
Okay. It was just you have some eclectic type interests. So I just, cheese, Bette Midler. I was just wondering if you combine those at any particular time. So
No, her
interesting.
daughter though has a podcast about hosting a party. And when I was teaching cheese classes, I was like, actually, I'd be the perfect guest for your daughter's podcast.
That's fantastic. So self-care. Now, are you going to put out some series on your YouTube channel with self-care, or are you still, keeping the vein of the sleep and relaxation and mindfulness with that?
Yeah, I'm actually gonna. I want to build up the brand because I know there's people struggling with so much. So I am gonna start incorporating the morning mindfulness since
Mm-hmm.
I have my routine of journaling in the park when it's not cold or raining. I'm going to start releasing, basically piggybacking my Sunday releases or sleep stories always.
Okay.
Monday mornings, having a 10-minute meditation to start your week. So I'm going to start expanding on that. And then tackling the bigger issues. One of my biggest focuses, though, in terms of self care, is people getting in tune with what's going on inside and
Mm-hmm.
discovering what they actually want.
Right.
So much is about complaining about what people don't want,
Sure.
even if it's something as far removed as politics, and they
Right.
focus all their energy on that. There's no energy left to focus on what you want. So
Yeah. I try to stay away from the social media these days. It is absolutely crazy just
that
because.
is something, for on a personal level, that's what I started the past month. I was like, I don't need to share this anymore. If it's not related to work, I think I'm going to step back, and I feel so much better. It
Yeah.
reminds me of the time we didn't have it. It was great.
Yeah, there's just so much negativity out there, and what's interesting, I'm always an observer, looking at things and trying to take a little higher look above things. But it's kind of crazy because if you comment on something on a social media post and it has anything to do contrary to what the subject is, people don't have a conversation. They come out and they attack you, and I'm
I
like, wait a
know.
minute.
I
I'm
know.
like, whoa, 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 we're talking about this subject and you want to attack me to sort of discredit me? I'm like, you wouldn't do that on the street with somebody, if,
Well, sadly, I think people would now. It's escalating to the point, like what I'm seeing in New York, the stress levels of people just going to a grocery store, the personal attacks in the park, verbally. Like, we've been in lockdown for a while.
yeah,
People have been in their own heads, and the social etiquette and the stress. But the thing that I question is, let's say this is my thing that I always do, and maybe it's creepy, but having lost my grandmother at such an young age and seeing her, kind of wither away, I always think about my deathbed. And I think, looking back, what is the span of my life going to be like? What do I
mhm,
want to see? Do I want to see 40 years of my life on the internet judging other people?
yeah,
Because that's what's happening. People are losing years of their lives, and immediate family members of mine, I go to visit, they don't see me. And especially during the pandemic, being able to finally see each other face to face, they're on the phone and on the computer, reading other people's lives, judging them, getting riled up.
yeah,
It's such a distraction.
it is. And the sad thing is that, everybody needs to be loved, you know, and there's
Mhm.
such a core need of being validated. We are.
Yes, I
Everybody
see that.
needs to
Yeah.
be validated. And I think I just recently just did a rant on this because here and there I do few rants, but it's just everybody needs to be validated. And, I think that's the part of our division today is that if you're not on the same side of somebody that has an opinion and stuff, they're looking for validation, they just their little group or their little opinion, they want to be validated.
Right.
And if you don't agree with them, then they want to eradicate you, because you're not validating them. And so it's been
Right.
interesting.
But my bigger question to them is, why haven't you self-validated?
Yeah.
Why aren't you walking out into the world confident in yourself and no longer plugging into that? It is a very hollow way to get an instant fix and a dopamine rush. And,
Yeah.
I think, and this is another thing with social media that I found, people are confusing attention with deep connection.
Exactly.
Even like close friends and relationships I have, it's like, oh yeah, I haven't seen you in like a month, but I've seen your stories. Like I'm living vicariously through this representation that you're putting out there. And then a lot of times you check in with people and they're not in a good place.
No.
When you actually pick up the phone or see them, you're like, well, how are you really doing?
Yeah.
We need to work on this as a society.
And we have more in common than we have apart. And, we're all humans, and you boil it down to one thing. Hey, everybody needs to be loved and validated. And you're so right about people not self-validating. I recently recorded an episode with a lady, and she had just all kinds of just different labels or monikers that, she was woman in a man-dominated field. She's an immigrant. She's a person of color. She's this and that. And she's also a lesbian. And I said, well, I'm growing up, I didn't ever pay any attention to any of those things. You were just if I would have met you, you're just another person. I'm colorblind. And she stopped me and she's like, well, no, I want you to be more than that. I don't want you to be colorblind. I want you to recognize and celebrate me. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. You're not celebrating me. You're just doing this. And I'm like, your need for validation is so strong. How about you just be happy with who you are and don't worry about all this other stuff? So it's just a really strange time in our culture.
Yeah, and I think it's harder she does have everything that's going to be stacked in a more difficult life than say I would have, because
I agree.
Our cultural norms. But it's a tricky situation that, the spiritual path that I've taken is really shown that if you get stuck up on story too much, you're not going to be able to get to where you want to. You're going to start self-limiting.
Yeah.
And there are the limitations and hardships that,
Sure.
I just recognizing myself, looking at the journey of being treated as an object. That's basically what my career was. I was worth more for body parts and I was worth, things that weren't who I am. It didn't matter if I came into the room as a full person, I wasn't seen. One of the last jobs that I had was for a TV show that was canceled for a very, very famous director. And I spent 4 hours having a team of 5 people shorten the hem of my skirt and take pictures to this famous director as they were accidentally stabbing me in the leg with pins and pinched shoes. And he couldn't decide if my butt looked good enough. And I'm like, this is what people even like in my small town would be like, oh my God, Michelle was on this TV show.
Right.
And it's celebrated in a way that I was more fulfilled cutting buffalo mozzarella and putting it on a slate and giving people an experience where they remembered that hour with me than I ever felt working in these other circles.
Sure.
Well,
it's obvious to me that you've been on a journey, like a lot of people, where you've gotten to a point where the things you were doing ended up being rather shallow, and then you moved on to purpose. And is that a fair thing to say?
Yeah, I always thought that somehow my voice would influence people. I thought it was going to be singing, but it's putting them to sleep, which is perfectly fine with me.
Hey, I know people who just speak in public and do that.
Well, it's so funny how many people, you get to this point, and it's kind of scary to me when I think about thousands of people are listening to my voice, and so many people have written to me and they're like, you're the last voice I hear every night.
Well, that's nice.
Like you when it's put that way.
Well, there's two ways to look at that. Either you're very masterful or you're boring as hell, right?
Probably both.
Well, I doubt that. Well, you're doing great things, and I'm excited to have you on the show today. Thank you for being transparent and telling your story. Okay, and I'm looking forward to see what you're doing with self-care coming up the next little bit. I'm definitely going to follow your channel. I'll be out there taking a look at that. So give us your website so people can find you.
Sure. It's michellessanctuary.com. Michelle with 2 L's.
Fantastic. All right. Appreciate that. Okay. So Michelle, what I ask every single guest when they come on, it's a little bit of out of left field. In Western culture, we have this concept called a bucket list. All right. And it's things we want to do before our time on earth is done. And I've actually interviewed the bucket list guy. His name is Trav Bell. He's down in Melbourne, Australia. He's a hoot to listen to. It's episode number 60. And he talks about living a purposeful life. And he has done amazing things. And he doesn't really talk about a bucket list. He's just being purposeful. Anyway,
yeah.
Back to this thing. You have a bucket list, but there's always an opposite of everything in the universe. And so there's this other list of things you don't want to do, right? Okay, so that rhymes with bucket and starts with an F, but I kind of keep a family show here a little bit. So it's an F-it list, all right? So what might be a thing or two that would be on your F-it list? Okay, now I'll give you some ideas. I'll share a couple because this is an odd question. Okay, people talk about their backgrounds and stuff. I will never ever again do a Lakota Sioux sweat lodge. The idea of excessive heat, excessive humidity, excessive drumming, and excessive chanting, I'm not doing that. Sardines makes that list. I'm not going to have a whole set of snakes for pets. So those might be some things on my F-it list. What might be an item or two that would be on your F-it list?
Well, I'm not going to say entirely never because I might slip up and I don't want to be held accountable like that I'm a liar. But my aim is to never engage in manipulation. And this is something that is so normalized that we are unconscious of it. And there are times that I feel in relationships and business, I've been manipulated and I don't always see it in that light. And I've become so focused and hyper aware of that. I feel everything from social media posts to this false representation. There's so many different ways one can manipulate. And the answer to that is vulnerability, you know? And that's what I worked on so hard. I was raised in a family where you would be, you know, sarcastic and you would use these weird jokes and jabs to try and get at what you want, but it's all manipulation instead of just saying, I really need you to do this for me, or this is how I feel. Okay. So in my work and personal life, the manipulation thing's out the window, done.
That's a great answer. Anything else?
Borrowing from Glennon Doyle, she talks about how she will never stay in a room where the conversation isn't right, or a career or anything that doesn't sit right. And for the most part, I've done pretty well with that. But if something doesn't sit right with me internally anymore, yeah, the body knows I'm out.
Well, fantastic. Those are great. Great answers. Well, I appreciate you coming on today, joining us from New York. It's been a pleasure to get to know you. It's been a fun interview.
Great.
And so we'll call this one a wrap for today. So until next time, folks, we'll say the 3 things I say every time. Be safe, but be bold, and make it a great day.